Why I quit my job? Work smarter, not harder. Hi, this is Jeff at Below Average. I'd like to give you a little bit of my thought process on why I quit my job. Wasn't something that just popped up or was something that did a spur of the moment. This is a progress that was leading up my entire life. And I'd like to give you a little bit of a preview of the reasons why. Now, my entire life, I've always worked a regular job, and most of my life I had a second and a third job with that. Having a family, raising kids, wife was mostly home, worked very little, and so I took on that responsibility. Now, as we're moving up through the work system, I guess as you could call it, I found that jobs just kept leaving. First one was there a few years, ended up just deciding to sell on out, shut down, left, had to go start over again. Was at that place for 3, 4 years, 5 years. Found out that they were selling out and they were trying to get rid of people to make their profit margin look better. So once again, after making a little bit of money, getting some nice vacation, I had to once again start over. Went to another place, was there for a little over 5 years, got a letter stating they were shutting down. Got a letter in the mail because we were a large enough company. By federal law, they had to do that. So once again, got up to making a little bit of money, a little vacation, and having to start all over again. And at my last job, I was there a little over 16 years, and I quit. I quit my job. Once again, like I said, work smarter, not harder. Please, if you can, like, subscribe, and comment down below, as I'd much appreciate this, and for other individuals that might watch this and be contemplating the same thing, so to give them some kind of ideas on not just myself, but what you have went through in your life. Hey, so that is the initial process of what I was thinking as I kept going through this, and it wasn't just me. Every company I went to seemed to find that there were other individuals that were going through the same thing. If you were in my age bracket, I'm in my 50s. You had went through some of the 90s and early 2000s of a lot of jobs just completely uprooting and leaving the country or completely shutting down, and people from all walks of life that were end up having to restart over again. So I seen a lot of this, and everybody I seen, because I was younger at the time, it was older people. I could see the looks on their faces, the pay cuts, the starting over on vacation, as I physically went through that myself. It's tough when you get 3 weeks of vacation, you go down to zero, and it takes you 5 years to get back up to 3 weeks of vacation. This was the norm back in the 90s and early 2000s. So, like I said, this was the process I started going through as I started thinking about how I got to the decision to quit my job. Now, there was many other things, and like I said, I'll go through these and give you some easy examples, and I'll go off the list that I created. One thing is, after all these years of my last job, being there a little over 16 years, I found that it seemed like I was happy somewhat with what I was making, working a little overtime, but I still had to work a second job because it still wasn't enough. Just wasn't quite enough. You couldn't always bank on getting a few hours a week of overtime because it was just all over the place. So it was kind of hard to determine. A lot of other factors would determine what kind of hours you would get overtime, or the amount of overtime you could get. So I started thinking about, how could I do that myself? How could I retake my life back after all these years? I'm getting older, working, still having to work overtime, still having to have a second job, still trying to figure out, what in the world's going on, as I hit in my early 50s at this point, and thinking, this is not making any sense to me. And I'm not the only one. There's people that are 10, 15 years older than me that are going through the same thing. So I'm thinking, is there a way I can make a change to this? If I don't, I'm going to end up just like them. There's nothing different or special about anything I'm doing or was doing at the time that I can say, hey, in 10, 15 years, I'm going to be drastically different than them. We're all the same. Working in a factory, average job, probably below average for pay and everything else, but it's kind of how I was looking at it. So once again, this was my thought process. So let me check that one off my list, please. So I was also thinking about, is there any way I can work less and even make the same money? This is part of retaking my life back. Or the probably the better one is, could I work the same and make a lot more money? Where I was at, there was no potential. The only potential to make more money was to give the company more of my life, more of my hours. It was more overtime hours. It wasn't like in the future I could see a massive pay increase. So I could say, hey, in 40, I can make this in 40 hours. That wasn't it. It was how much extra overtime I can make more than I'm working now to make more money. More of my life. That's what I wanted to get away from. That's when I started thinking something's got to change. Something's got to be different. Because I've seen the ups and downs of overtime. I've seen how people panicked, couldn't pay bills because they didn't want to get a second job because they were working so many hours. They're hoping overtime was coming back, or it would come back to the point that they were working crazy hours, 20, 30 hours a week overtime, which is ridiculous. You're just giving your entire lives away. Life is short. Let me tell you, life is short. So once again, part of my thought process. So let me check that one off my list. Sorry about that. The other thing I was noticing is that people a lot older than me, even though the job I was at wasn't a very physical job, there was a little bit to it. And I seen people, bodies physically breaking down as they're getting slower. Knees were hurting, backs were hurting, arms, little surgeries for carpal tunnel, shoulder problems. All these kinds of issues were coming up more and more for individuals that had a physical job, like probably most everybody, like everybody in the factory industry, construction workers, mechanics, all these people, they're breaking down. Look at the skilled trades people. A lot of them, you get them old enough, especially the ones that do the mechanical stuff, they're all beat up, they're sore, they're tired, they're run down. And that's part of life, and that's how it is. But I was trying to figure out, is there a way around some of that? And the people I noticed, at least, that their bodies weren't physically breaking down were individuals that were utilizing more of their mind, that their skill set wasn't necessarily with their hands or doing physical work. It was things that they knew, they thought of, that they were using their mind. These people are working not with the physical limitations later in life, but some of them are working longer in life, and if they really enjoy their work, they keep doing it all the way till maybe they pass away because they enjoy it so much. And there is no physical work. The mind is where hopefully you'll be able to keep longer than your physical body of the breakdown. So that was another thought of my process. I'll take that one off. And I would have to say that the amount of work, back to the physical stuff just a little bit. You have, as you get older, there's sometimes in some jobs, there's some, I would say, companies or people or individuals would like to see you probably leave or retire when you physically can or don't want to. And they'll put you maybe into some positions that makes it a little bit harder on the physical part of it, just to try to show you, because you can't do the job as good as somebody 30 years younger than you. You might be smarter than them on that job because you have the history. But at that point on those jobs, that doesn't mean a whole lot. So back to the whole physical thing, they might put you in a position that makes it a little bit tougher and harder on you towards the end, and you feel like you're being pushed out from a place that you spent a portion of your life, and this is part of my thought process. Things of, what am I going to do? This is all the ramblings in my head. Probably like now, it sounds like I'm rambling a lot. But let me keep going on. Let me take that one off. Another thing that was part of the process is I sat back and I noticed in my last job, a little over 16 years there, that I had three coworkers. Now this is a small place. This is a factory of barely over 100 people, barely over 100 people working. And there's three coworkers that passed away before retirement. One died of cancer. One died of something I never really knew exactly, but was physically at work when they got hauled on out of there. And they only lasted a week or two later and they passed away. And another individual that had to leave because of some physical limitations before retirement, and before they could physically retire, they passed away. So this really was on my mind, is at a small place that I was at that had three individuals, and these were all women, passed away. So then, when this was going on, I started asking around a little bit. I started talking to some people that were maybe a little bit more, I would say, in management. Ask them about how healthy are some of the people we have here. I'm not talking about that they eat bad or anything else. Just I actually approached them with, why is our insurance, that I found out that was the only one that they sought after? Why didn't they look at other companies? And I found out that there was a company, one of the large ones in my area, that wouldn't even quote us insurance anymore because we had a high rate of cancer. So when I started asking around a little bit, started talking to some people, and found out there was quite a few women, and only women, for some reason, at my workplace that had there's quite a few that went through cancer, breast cancer, all the normal stuff like your one, but a large enough amount that an insurance company wouldn't even quote us insurance. That they were that you know that they could see, for the amount of people we had working there, for the amount of people that had these issues, was greater than their scale and how they determine their costs and everything else. That one weighed heavily on my mind as I was approaching. One of the ladies was younger than me, and the other two were older. But I was approaching those ages where I started thinking about, is the stuff that we're doing. I was in automotive, so is the stuff we're doing in automotive, some of those chemicals, actually bad for some people or for a lot of people's long-term health? So another thing that was weighing heavily, on my mind as I was going through all these things, I was compiling the list together. So it was pretty tough. And we did have one individual who retired more at a normal age, mid 60s. But I think it was about 3 years after retirement, passed away. Now, I know they had some other issues and everything else, but once again, this was a person that wasn't they weren't old, they were still in their 60s. So, like I said, and this was somebody I physically worked with a lot. For a lot of my years there before they left, I worked a lot with them. So it weighed on me, as I'm getting older myself, and I start seeing and hearing these things. The insurance won't cover us. A lot of women have had cancer. 3 people have passed away that have been there. One person retires and dies early. Compiling in my head. It's all building up. This is all a build up. Let me please take that one off. Sorry about that. And another thing that kind of was happening with this, at my workplace, some of the individuals at the top of management on the company would maybe rotate them possibly every handful of years. And I noticed that about every time we got somebody new, there was a lot of things that would change for what I would felt for the worse on the floor. I call us where the floor, where the bottom, where the workers. And I noticed that a lot of what we had to say just didn't, even though if it meant we could prove things out, it just didn't mean anything anymore. And I'm not exactly sure this whole structure of how this would come to be, because the reason they were able to do the rotation is because of the workers on the floor making the company money. I find very few people in those positions probably do a whole lot for any physical company, at least where I was at. But I did notice a drastic change in each individual over the years of the time frame, that were much harder to work with. And so that kind of was discouraging, because I had a job where where I was able to express some ideas, prove them on out. For years, they went with them. Everything worked good, for the good or the bad. I was able to at least go through with it. In the last handful of years I was there, um, that was definitely disappearing and disappearing fast. Common sense things were tossed off the table. Things weren't made no sense. Some people quit there that that you would think would be there forever. Very smart people, and I started thinking, okay, it doesn't make any sense, but that's the only thing that was changing. So another thing that weighed in my head about what am I going to do, what's going on, what's my future here. I'm just a regular worker, um, and just going through that process. That was probably a minor, more of a minor one, because eventually they would rotate, and you'd always hope maybe they'd go back, you know. But another one I always had is that I've been through enough companies in my lifetime so far, and a lot of them all left or shut down for reasons. But could this company leave? Could this company shut down? And as I got older, I started worrying about that. Do I want to start over again? I'm going to start over because I have to. Because if the company shut down, or they sold, or they moved, all the things that's happened in the past where I seemed to roll it off my shoulders because I was young and just figured I'd just double down and work harder and things are going to work out. But started seeing and thinking about all the older people that were older than me that I physically seen this happen to. People that were in some jobs for 10, 15, 20 years. They'd lose almost 50% of their pay as they had to start over again, lose all their vacation, and now they're just trying to get to a form of retirement, but their pay is cut down so bad now they're physically having to work more hours now later in life than they ever did earlier in life. And as much as that one might have been not probably wouldn't happen at my last company, it was still there. So it was something I had to think about, something I had to make sure, as I processed all these things in my head about what's going on, what am I doing, how am I going to retake my life back. Life's too short. All these phrases. It's true. It's true. You go through this once, the older you get, the harder it is on your body or your physicality or even trying to get hired at a place, all kinds of things. So, all this stuff, obviously, one building up right after the other. Let me take that one off my list there. Thank you. Another one about making my own decisions and living with the consequences of those. See, on my last job, I had that a little bit. They allowed me to do some of that stuff. And I was able to prove out a lot of things that I think that they never thought could happen, but I thought were pretty common sense. And once that went away because of some of the different higher up management that was taken over, some of the changes a little bit here and there with the company, it was getting pretty tough. So decision making wasn't part of my, even though they said it was part of my job, it really wasn't. Even lower level management got to the point they didn't want to listen anymore or step on out or do anything different. Don't know why. Maybe they're nervous or afraid for their jobs too. I don't know. But that was something I noticed, and that was towards the end. So that was just another little layer on the buildup that kept happening. It wasn't that I was probably been at my job a long time that I was kind of getting, stuck in my own way and all that kind of stuff. I don't feel it was anything like that. I definitely feel, because I did move to a different department, able to do the same type of stuff, and then it's just a total breakdown of they didn't seem to want to listen, didn't seem to care. Wasn't really sure. It was kind of, I could have just blown it off and whatever and say, hey, I don't care as long as I'm getting paid. And if I would have stayed, I probably would have been that route, But like I said, another brick on the layer. A small one, but another brick on the layer. Like I said, making my own decisions probably was part of a big thing that would make the day go good, as I could end up doing things along those lines. Make sure I got to check that one off too. Like I said, the closing down the company pie wasn't that big a deal. Now here's one that really dialed into me towards the end, and it was probably the biggest part of this whole decision process. I had a lot of years, a little over 16 years, I could see the pay of where I was at to where I started, how the company would how they would change their structure, their pay, per the hourly employee. So over my whole time frame there, after you hit the top off pay, which is a lot of companies, your first few years you're going to get more money than than you will later, just to get you up there. So I'm talking about after that for anybody, for myself, is what happened. Is I'm talking a series of probably like 10, 11, 12 years there that I started noticing that the pay all the time would only go up 15 to 20 cents a year. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no, that was it. So at first you don't think about it. You just, I'm moving up, I'm moving up, I'm moving up. And I started realizing that, every year, this 15 to 20 cent range, approximately, I don't remember exactly, but it was always approximately that. Our benefits would go up in price, which is natural. Everybody has benefits go up. But I started noticing, sometimes that $4 or $5 a week going up, and then you take 20 cents times 40 hours, that's $8. And you start thinking $8 minus the 4 or 5 my insurance is going up, I'm making $3, $4 more a week. That's a joke. That's the entire year until the next raise. And then when they add the insurance increase and stuff in there again, you're still making the same thing. It's going to take forever before that little $3, $4 a week was going to add up. Now, sure, if you worked a little overtime, you'd see a tiny bit more there. Tiny bit if you were working a lot of overtime. That's not always the case. That's not always the case. I have a lot of overtime. Maybe a little, 3, 4, 5 hours a week. But 20 cents, time and a half, 30 cents times 5, that's $1.50. See what I'm talking about? So I started looking at that scenario. And at this point, I was in my early 50s. And I figured, you know what? I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say 20 cents an hour increase per year. 5 years, that's $1. I can look at it easily. In about 15 years, I'm going to be in my upper 60s. Easily could chance to retire. Anywhere's right in there. So what am I going to make at 20 cents an hour? Like I said, I'm giving them the high side. For every 5 years is $1. That's 15 years. That's $3 more an hour from where I'm at now. And I went back and I looked after I was topped off from that next 10 to 12 years. That scenario was still in play. There was only, I think, one time in there that I got an extra 50 cents for the job I had. That was it. The whole time frame, everything else was the same. It was all right in that ballpark, right in that time frame. See, at the end, before I quit, I was paying a little over $100 a week for all my benefits. I go back 16 and a half years, I was barely paying $30 a week. So adding $5 every week, every year that would be added to what we'd have to pay, lined up exactly with what was happening my entire time there, on top of the up to 15 to 20 cents an hour, and that was it. Bonuses were stagnant. No matter, they had their clause like on that, where it was tied with so many different variables within the company that nobody ever got almost no more than what they did my last year there to 10 years before that. It wasn't ever changing. So there was never nothing. There's no high-end bonuses or nothing crazy. I never had nothing like that. So back to the pay, because that was the big one. 15 years from now, I'm going to make $3 more an hour where I'm at. That seems like a freaking joke. And you add the benefits scenario into there, and you cut that, instead of $8 a week, you cut it down to $4. You cut that in half. So basically, I could look at it and say, in 15 years, I'm going to make $1.50 more an hour. Now, if you think that sounds stupid, and you think I'm crazy, then you're not old enough to realize that that's how the pay structure works across almost all the industries. Wherever you're at now and you're topped off, especially if you're in a lower level or factory job, you're hourly or something like that, I guarantee you can apply the same scenario across the board, that if you're lucky to be at your place in 10, 15, 20 years. The only thing you might gain is more vacation time. And there's even a top off to that. Think about it. This is what was driving me nuts. This is what was killing me. This is what literally made me freaking want to just jump right off the cliff. I could not take this thinking that it is literally possible for me in the next 15 years at that time that I could only make, in theory, $1.50 more an hour. Even if the insurance was paid for, I'm talking $3 an hour. That's 120. At the end of that 15 years, I'll be in my late 60s. That was barely over $100 more a week. Don't you think that is absolutely crazy? That is absolutely crazy. But that's how it was. And that's how it is, and that's how it will be. Everybody who's left at my place is going to go through that same thing. If they would sit back and they would look and see what's going on. There's no magical pay raises in the future. There's nothing crazy going to happen. You're not going to change the world there. So you better get used to where you're at. If you're comfortable and you're happy there and you're just going to say, I'm just going to get through, then that's fine. But I couldn't, that drove me nuts. Drove me nuts. That was the biggest brick on this layer. That was the biggest one that drove me to the point of, I got to figure out something else. Because guess what? Worst scenario is I quit my job. I go do something else. X amount of time later, it don't pan out. I go back to a regular job. And you know what? They're all paying similar to where I was at when I was there for 16 years. Very little financial hurt from this scenario. Almost none. As scary as what it sounds like, almost none. You put that kind of time in and you come up to my realization, almost none. So now the next thing is, do I or don't I? And at this point in my life, my kids were out. I didn't have to worry about health care for them. I just had my wife who wasn't working to have to worry about it. I had to decide something else. And you know what? I quit my job. I was 52 years old when I quit. And this is something different that you probably won't find on YouTube. That was over 4 years ago, folks. Over 4 years ago. I hope you started watching through this whole scenario here that I'm talking about to get to the point to realize that I'm talking about something that happened 4.5 years ago. I am now 56. But that was my thought process then. That's what pushed me over the edge. That's what got to the point. I gotta go. I gotta try something else. I gotta make a difference. I gotta retake back my life. Work smarter, not harder. And that's what I ended up doing. So I really appreciate it if you went through the whole video to end up finding out what I am talking about now is something that I just didn't do right now that I did over 4 years ago. And no matter what, it was a great thing. Now I might try to do a future video depending on if I get any comments or anybody asking questions on where I stand now on everything across the board, what I'm thinking about in the future and everything else. I might end up doing something like a scenario like that. I probably will. Maybe I'll even recap the 4 years up until this point to see what I'm at, where everything's at now and what I'm thinking. I'm glad I did it. It has been a great experience. I wouldn't change that scenario. Now, I'm not telling you, like I said, I'll probably have to do another video. I'm not telling you that things are rosy, things I'm making more money, everything else. But all those things I end up talking about through this whole thing, my decisions, how I do it. If I stayed at the company I was at last, guess what? I wouldn't even be making I'd be making about $1 more an hour than what I left. A little bit right in there. Yeah. So I didn't miss much, didn't lose much, nothing. But I retook back my life, and I love it. And I got to keep working harder towards pushing towards making the changes that I still need. Nothing ever changes. You got to make changes as you go. No different than at a workplace. Obstacles are there. You got to end up going through them. You got to jump the hurdles. You got to figure out things. You got to try to do some stuff. Then you're going to do whatever it takes. But please, if you can, let me make sure. I think I hit everything on my list. I tell you, the money one at the end was by far the biggest. When I thought 3 years I'd be making only $3 more an hour, that just sounds devastating. Sounds devastating, and it's panning out. 4.5 years later, I would be in that same boat in my previous company. So, yes. So, like I said, retake back your life. Life is too short. Make a change. Do something different. Think about it first, how you're going to do it. Please, please like, subscribe, comment down below. I really appreciate if you could do it. Like I said, it's not just for me. It's for everybody else who might listen to this, who is thinking or going through the same scenario of wanting to hear the stuff that my thought process was, how this worked out, that they're not the only ones. And they can listen to somebody actually on YouTube that has went through this stuff. Like I said, that was 4.5 years ago. I was 52 then. I am 56 now. Thank you. Thank you very much if you made it all the way to the end. You don't know how much I appreciate it. Have a great night.